I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Constellation Visual Effects Supervisor Doug Larmour. Doug, the VFX in this show are outrageously complex. So I want to start with the beginning. You get the job and you're told about the story. You've got to depict astronauts in orbit on the International Space Station, out in the dark, cold void of space. No pressure, right?
No, none. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a fairly big ask, but at the same time, nothing that has ever been like not done before. So I mean, like I suppose from a point of view, having worked on a few space projects before and knowing that, okay, so there's a solution for like zero G people, right? You kind of build sets with take off roofs and ceilings, and you build a wing system and a flying system with some really good special effects people. You fly them in, you get a whole lot of wonderful people to remove all your wires for you. And then you and in terms of kind of like floating objects and CG piece of that, it's all doable. It's all kind of like, it's not nothing, it's all rigid body stuff. There's nothing kind of crazy there. The scale of it was in terms of, we've got the first 2 episodes of 8, which a good half of it is in space. So you're kind of like talking about at least an hour of space. So it's kind of it's definitely, the scale of it was tricky. I would also say that, oops, sorry. I'd also say that the biggest individual piece that was worrying about that whole thing was probably the zero-G fire and the zero-G kind of blood, because they're not things that people are used to seeing. I mean, as you well probably know, that VFX works really well when you're kind of like trying to kind of sell something that people understand and people know. And kind of like you set things in reality, you set kind of as much as you can with full CG things, you kind of try and kind of match reality as much as possible. And as long as you do a good enough job and have enough actual reality in front of the camera, then it's easy to sell the things behind it. The problem is when you have something that's in your face, like the blood and or the kind of the CG fire, which is kind of like zero-G fire. Well, no one knows what it looks like. So it's kind of, it's all the experiments that have been done with fire in zero-G have been tiny, like literally, because you don't want to put fire in this International Space Station because it's like dangerous. There's a lot of oxygen flying around, and there's kind of, and it's a very fragile environment. So there's not many people who've done anything. The people have like taken lighters and candles into like the zero-G plane that the astronauts fly in, you know, just to train. It's like the thing's called the vomit comet or whatever it is. Anyway, but I mean, and people have done lighter tests to see how it kind of like the flames look, but still it's not big enough to kind of scale up enough. So I suppose that was in my head before we started, that was probably the zero-G fire and zero-G blood were probably the 2 pieces that I was most excited and or most interested in kind of getting right, because if we could make those things sell, then we'll have sold the world.
Yeah, I mean, the zero-G work is extraordinary. I'm always amazed by it because as a layperson who has no freaking idea about how visual effects are put together, I was blown away. And like the last time I saw zero-G blood was in the 1991 Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country with the pink blood. This is real, very realistic. And you know, one of the astronauts is very badly injured, and that whole sequence is completely mind-blowing. So I guess the question for you is, once it's all been pieced together and you've got various teams and vendors working on various aspects, what are your thoughts about how it all turned out? Like, well, how do you feel about it?
I feel like we did a good job. I'm really happy with the whole accident in space scene. And we spent a long time before we shot pre-visualizing the sequence. We got Michelle McLaren, our wonderful director of episode 1 and 2, in with Third Floor to kind of like run through how we would set these things up, where people would be, what kind of things would happen, where the camera would be, where the actors would fly to, and use that as a guide to kind of shoot by, rather than what often happens is that you build a set, you put your director and your actors in there, they block it out and they work it out together. But with an International Space Station, to start off with, we didn't know how much of the set to build because we knew we couldn't build the whole thing. It'd be mental. That would be like just not cost effective in any way, shape, or form. So it was really useful to get our director into previs so we can kind of like let her fly herself around the ISS, see what looks interesting from a kind of visual point of view, see where the story was meant to have people, see where we could put the the Cold Atomic Laboratory in to kind of make sure that was in a nice space that they could fly around with bash heads against and fly people around. So once we did that, we then used that as a template to look at these with the special effects and visual effects people like myself and go, okay, what can we do? Where can we add to this? Is this realistic to actually do what we want to do here? Can we change the angle here so we can make it easier to shoot? If we do it here, how much do we have to build? So we talked to Andy Nicholson, who's an amazing production designer, who'd worked on Gravity before, so he was like completely knowledgeable about the ISS and what to build and how to build it. So and we, as a collaborative team, kind of put together how would make it work. So so it was really useful to kind of like from that whole standpoint of the idea of how do you do this entire sequence where things are flying around, blowing up, kind of like people flying from one side to the other in zero G, kind of like pieces of shard flying through the air, fire extinguishers going off, CO2 getting blown about, fire coming up. We really had to kind of like nail down each one of those scenes specifically before we even got to building the set. So as we knew where we would be, and then you could use that pre-visualization as a shooting guide and be able to pull it off. I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm very proud of the work that we did. I think it was the scale of it was quite large, and to pull it off to the extent we did, I'm really happy. Could things have been better? Of course they could. Given another 6 months, could we have worked it even more? Yeah, you know. But I mean, but I think I'm quite happy with it. I'm quite happy with it. I mean, I think in terms of the blood, I think was that was the so yeah, several approaches to that. That's the thing that nearly didn't come off because I think our scale of what we wanted, we didn't quite reach that. We had to pull back from that in order to kind of make it look a bit more realistic. Originally, we had pools of blood on a wall, kind of like flying, like blowing out the wall, but it didn't ever look quite real enough. It looked too fantastic for people to believe it. And so we had to pull that back and make it just coming out of the arm and blobbing up through camera. And so, but I mean, we even invented like the special effects makeup guys because we wanted to have on-set reference. We wanted to be able to kind of like see what would like translucent blood-like material look in this lighting environment. So we spent a couple of weeks kind of making this like very viscous but still transparent and not wobbly gel that we could like, so it looked like blood. It kind of could make a little globule of it and stick against the wall, and so you can see how that kind of like transformed the area it was in and how it looked and how the light kind of glinted off it and stuff like that. That was very useful as a reference as well. In the end, we took most of that off and replaced it with stuff that was floating around, but at the same time, it was a really useful tool to have.
You know, picking up on something you mentioned a little earlier, I hear from VFX supervisors all the time that the quote is, "You're never really done with a shot, you just run out of time." And do you subscribe to that notion?
There's certainly a diminishing rate of return in terms of how the first, within the first couple of weeks of having something truly worked on, you'll get to a place which is kind of, it's all right. And then, but then it's the difference between all right and really good is that painstaking hours and hours and hours of matching to reference, looking at it, playing with it, kind of making. But then at the same time, you can't do that on every single shot, because if you do that on every single shot, you won't have enough time to get everything done. So what's generally key is to work on key shots, to make sure that you pick out a couple of shots that you know are going to be like really important to the story and or really important to the set piece. And if you work enough on those, you can give yourself a visual recipe to follow. So it's like, so you get your key artist to work on one of the major shots, make really work at that. But that in itself is a learning curve for all the other artists who are working on it. So it's that then you're able to go, okay, well, this is what this looks like, and we use these different things here to make that work. Okay, now we know that. boom, let's use these 50 shots here. I'm going to try and use the same recipe, and let's see where we get with that recipe. And obviously, each individual shot needs its own kind of like final touches, and but at the same time, that if you're able to do those shots early enough, you give yourself the time to make sure that you can get everything done. Key to that is a good relationship with your director and your executives in order to kind of like push shots that before a shot is even probably like before you've got your final cut, to kind of be able to go, okay, we need to kind of work on these now. I know you haven't finished your cut. I know you're, but let's make a line in the sand and say, okay, these shots are probably in. And at that point, then we can kind of go and start working on them, because that's the time that you spend noodling. That's the time that you kind of like develop and do all your look development and kind of making sure that you can achieve the goal. Because at that point, then you haven't even, you know what you're thinking you're going to do, but you haven't kind of tried it out yet. It's not until you get to the point where you're really like elbow deep in the work that you know that you're where it's going to go and how long it's actually really going to take you.
Yeah, given all the previous work and a lot of this work being CGI, and I assume there's going to be a lot of tactile in-camera stuff as well, is part of your role to coordinate how the actors and the crew move around each set to ensure that, you know, the visual effects are going to work out properly as they get put in, you know, in post-production? Talk us through that process, because it's really
100%. I
confusing.
mean, in terms of on set, it's part of your role is to advise, and part of your role is to design, and part of your role is to police. So in terms of, so it's kind of so for some shots, like for instance, like so if we're, let's take the 0G fire sequence where the big fireballs getting pushed down and they're getting pushed by the heat, and the fire extinguisher they're holding away from the fireball to get to safety in the raspberry. So for that, we obviously, my role at the start is to look at the script and talk to the director about, okay, well, what do you want to see here? Then allow her to kind of like give her the opportunity to go into pre-visualization to kind of really see that, so everyone can see what we're going on. Give them a script as the visual script as to what's going on. Then to talk to the special effects and stunts supervisor, Martin Goris, who's amazing, by the way, who built the whole kind of like winch system, was one of the biggest in the world at the moment. And then talk to the Andy Nicholson, who's the set designer and production designer, who's kind of like, okay, well, we can do this bit. Special effects can do this bit. We need a set that can do this, that can take off the roof, that we can build this thing. So that whole design and kind of like and project management of that scene begins early, and then you get to the set and you get to the set build, and you talk about how much of the ceiling can they build, how small the gap can they fit. Well, in this case, not very small of a gap. It had to be the entire ceiling that went. In which case, then you talk to the riggers about, okay, what green screen can we put? How can we hang green screen but still have wires coming through? How can we kind of like make sure that there's enough space and enough angles? Talk to the cameraman, talk to the DOP, Marcus Forderer, in terms of kind of like making sure that the what we get is what you see on the previs. Get everyone tied into that. Make sure that everyone is wanting to be faithful to that and they're all pulling in the same direction. So is it then you're talking to your gaffer and to making sure that those green screens are lit properly, and so you're all the way through making sure that by the time we come to shoot on that day, the green screen is lit, the set is in the right position, the cameraman's set in the right position, so that we can do our job. Now, there's got to be freedom for everyone to do their own little bit. There's got to be freedom for the cameraman to find a little different angle. There's got to be freedom for the DOP to kind of like light how he wants it to lit, or she, in this case, it was Mark Forder, so how he wants it to be lit, how the director to change her mind at the last minute a little bit to kind of like, well, actually, this feels a bit better if it's a bit wider. And in that case, you're on the set to kind of like, okay, this was our goal. Let's massage this. We can still do this so as we can make sure that I'll be able to. Or if they're kind of like, or if we're set up and all of a sudden the camera swings around and you're off the green screen, you're off the set, there's hair everywhere, and you're going, okay, we can't use that bit. I'm telling you now on set, I can't use that bit. So please, can we do another one where we don't use that bit? So at least we have a safety net when it comes to editing. So like, and then we get to whenever you get to editing, and kind of the director is and the editors are choosing exactly, because although you've kind of like set your set piece up and you've done your pre-visualization, and to be quite frank, Michelle was brilliant in terms of keeping to that pre-visualization and moving the crew through that, as opposed to a lot of directors want to have the coverage. They want to kind of like shoot what they have in their heads and what they have storyboarded, but then also shoot around that to give themselves the option later on to kind of make sure that to change it slightly. We didn't have the time because or money to kind of be able to do that. But at the same time, Michelle was stuck on from day one. This is what I want. This is what we're going to get. So that was very useful for our point of view. Because like, so sometimes you'll have to, as an on-set supervisor, you have to be very reactionary to a change of plan.
Yeah.
When a director gets a different notion about what they had and actually thinking about it, seeing it in front of them, they're going, actually, it would be cool if we could do this.
Mm.
And sometimes my job is then to kind of either manage that and go, yeah, okay, we can do that, and let's give you 10 minutes and we'll move green screens around and we'll make sure that the set that can dress this area over here because we don't want it to go off camera. And sometimes it's to say, no, you haven't got the money for that. We can't do that. Okay, you can shoot it, but at the same time, I'm telling you now, it's unlikely that we'll be able to have the budget unless you drop 5 other shots. And then for that, you can have live on set, knowing what you'll take to kind of do that, not stop people, because, you know, your director is king or queen in this regard. And so it's in terms of like allowing them the freedom to do that, but at the same time, give them the knowledge on set that they need to make the right decisions. Then when you get into editing, it's going to then question, okay, well, this is what you've got. We planned for, in our previs or in our storyboard, we planned for like 35 shots of this. We've now got 12 of this and 80 of this. How about we kind of swap some of these down and increase some of these up, or kind of like, let's make some deals here. Let's talk to the, get my producer to talk to the vendors and see what we can do in regards to kind of cost cutting and or kind of like moving kind of like development teams around to kind of like allow that to happen. So yeah, it's a management all the way through until we finally get the in some ways the easy bit, which is kind of sitting in front of a monitor, kind of looking at the images with artists and all the visual effects supervisors from the other houses, and talking through what things making it look good.
See, the thing is, what I'm hearing is like the visual effects supervisor has to be the problem solver because a lot of things have to be done with VFX. It's too difficult or expensive to do it in camera. You've got to make sure that you're all on the same page. You've got to have good leadership, good director, good producer, good showrunner. And if any of those pieces don't work, the whole thing kind of goes tits up. Would you say that that's pretty much the way it works in TV?
Tits up. I mean, I would say every show is different. I mean, this show is great and that everyone was on the same, pulling in the same direction, wanting the same thing. Working with a really tight budget. I mean, everyone said, "Oh, it's an Apple project, got loads of money," but no. So we definitely didn't have the money of gravity. So it's kind of like it needed everyone to be on the same page from day one, pulling in the same direction in order to kind of hit what we needed to hit in the budget that we had. But at the same time, if it doesn't work that way, then you just get compromised, and so you have to spend more money fixing things than you do creating things. And so that then, and you don't then have the time at the end of the day to really massage the shots that you want to massage, and therefore you get a lesser product. I don't think anyone will ever want to not finish. You don't never not finish. You always finish. You always find a way to get something out there. But it's the difference between something looking okay, or oh, that's cool, you know? Or sweet. You know,
or and not only looking amazing, but the story's hitting, the actors are doing what they need to do, everything's just working. And I felt like I don't want to spoil the rest of the season for people who haven't seen it yet, but those first couple of episodes, especially the pilot, is completely breathtaking. And
you don't have any time to breathe. You don't have any time to breathe.
There's nothing. It's really relentless. And I did think about Gravity and thought that this to me felt just as claustrophobic and dangerous and riveting as a film like that. And that's to me, that would be something that I would want to aspire to if I was working on a show like this. Anyway.
Well, we certainly had that as our goal. We certainly had Gravity that kind of like, guy, okay, we've got to make it look just as good as this. If we don't make it just as good as this, then no one will believe it. And in terms of the peril, you've got to feel the peril. You've got to feel like that she's completely stranded there as much as Sandra Bullock was in Gravity. You want to kind of feel that same fear for her life. I mean, I got to tell you, I do not want to go to space. I would I would the vulnerability of yourself and like even though you have hundreds of people behind you trying to fix things, what happens when it all goes wrong? I mean, that's that. I mean, and so, but for me, that the purpose of my job is to get you there, is to kind of is to set things up. Me and Andy Nicholson, in terms of his set design and our visual effects, if we can make you believe you are there, then we've done our goal, because then you can concentrate on how you feel about it. Then you can concentrate on the story and not go, ooh, look at that set wobble. Ooh, dear,
Exactly.
that doesn't look real.
Yeah, we need to be taken out of the artifice that is
Yeah.
inevitable when watching TV so that we can go along for the journey. And I've really felt that you guys achieved that. Doug, I just want to say you've already won an Emmy in 2018. I hope that we get to see you again on the Emmy red carpet because this work is extraordinary. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.